Well, hello there. You are listening to Living Legendary Podcast with Lady Sham and Baby Nigel. We have a very interesting guest today. Today we have Pippi Lovestocking, a legendary drag queen from San Francisco, originally from North Carolina, and Pippi appeared on the episode of Judge Steve Harvey on ABC, Season 2, Episode 5, Don't Drag Me Into This. If you've seen that episode, you'll know that I was the witness that came to Pippi's defense in a lawsuit between her and a very famous drag queen named Heclina. Now, Heclina recently tragically passed away while on tour in London. So we're going to be talking to Pippi all about her and all about Heclina in just a moment. We're getting her on the phone right now, and let's see if she answers.
Hello?
Well, hi, Pippi. How are you?
I'm good. Are we on the radio right now?
You are on the radio. You are on Living Legendary Podcast. How are you, baby?
Well, I'm doing okay. How are you? Well, it's starting to be springtime now, so the weather's changing. I'm enjoying that.
Well, thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for being here, Pippi. I was just giving you a little intro before we called you, and I did say that you are a legendary drag queen from San Francisco, originally from North Carolina. Can I ask you, first of all, for the listeners, of course I know, but we want to tell the listeners, what's your real name?
Scott-free.
Scott-free. So right now, you're a working actor. You work all the time because we're very good friends. I know all about what Pippi does, but Pippi and I met when I was just a teenager in San Francisco, and Pippi was one of probably the most popular drag queens in town. And Pippi would perform often at a club called The Stud, and that's where I met you because I had a fake ID and I was going there all the time.
Well, drag queens usually get allowed into clubs anyway because, you look so different from any ID you have. So.
Well, yeah,
but,
I would put on a lot of makeup and wigs to get in there. That's true.
Well, yeah, of course. Unlike today, you hardly wear any makeup now.
Right, Pippi, yeah, right.
You go for that natural.
All natural look,
yeah.
Right. So, Pippi, I know that you're from North Carolina. Is that right?
That's correct. That's where I was born, yeah.
What was it like growing up in North Carolina?
Well, it was terrible. Well, I mean, the year, I might as well be honest. I can tell you, the year I was born was 1967. That was the summer of love out here in California, and well, specifically San Francisco. But it was definitely the summer of hate back in North Carolina. And I wasn't in one of the larger cities there. The name of the town is called Benson, and it's well, I guess its closest bigger city would be Raleigh, which is the capital. But there was no internet. There was barely even any television. We just had your basic channel. So,
and when you say the summer of hate, that's because it was what, so homophobic?
Yes. I can laugh about it now, but it was definitely discouraged to be a sissy or to be flamboyant or to do anything that was not the traditional Christian heterosexual archetype. So, and these are rednecks too, and they're a lot of them are pretty can be violent. And also, we were neighbors with somebody who was a proud member of the Ku Klux Klan, and even went so far as to send us. They had not a weekly, but like a newspaper, the Klan, the Klan paper, and they would, throw it on our front porch, figuring that we'd want to read it.
When did you come out, Pippi? When did you actually tell people you were gay?
Well, that's a funny question because I was never really in the closet in the usual sense, because I'm one of those gays that can't pretend to be straight. Maybe now, later in life, I've been able to, because actually it's funny, I've been playing roles of straight fathers, and I mean, I think the the definition of what a straight guy is like has changed. But I was always flamboyant, and I always enjoyed dressing up as Wonder Woman or Cher. I'm talking when I'm like 7, 8 years old. The one of the oldest tricks in the book was to put a towel over your head, and that's your long, luxurious hair like Cher always had. So I think Whoopi Goldberg even talked about that in one of her earliest stand-up specials. But yeah, I was always drawn to dressing up and playing in girls things that were supposed to be for girls, dolls, and all that sort of stuff. So there was plenty of harassment coming at me from all around. So from my parents, mostly, my mother, who I mean, I guess in hindsight, I could say she was probably trying to protect me from, the kind of reaction I was going to be getting. But it wasn't cool to be who I was, frankly. So I did what most types of gays of my generation did, and that's go to the nearest big city. And the nearest big city to where I was Atlanta. And that's where I started doing my TV show in college on public access TV. It was the same channel where, believe it or not, RuPaul got her start. She was an Atlanta queen. And the World of Wonder had a studio there. Not a studio, but they just used the public access studio there.
It's interesting we're bringing them up again. Just so you guys know, World of Wonder is a production company that does RuPaul's Drag Race. They're incredible. They do all kinds of things, amazing shows, television, documentaries, and even feature films. World of Wonder.
So, yeah, this would have been the year like 1988. So this is really, seems like ancient history now. But that year was kind of remarkable because it was the Democratic Convention, and also one of the girls that I was, kind of clubbing around with ended up making a sex tape with Rob Lowe while he was in town. And that was kind of a scandal at that time, but it's all, blown over now. You'd have to really dig in the archives to find that. But there was a sex tape made. I think that was the first time a sex tape was kind of leaked. Now everybody has a sex tape. It's like that's the first thing they do before they become famous, like
So,
Kim Kardashian.
So Pippi, this is Nigel coming in here. The sex tape, that's like the demo tape, if you will, like a band. Like, oh, check out my demo. This is my brand. This is what I can offer to you.
Yeah,
that's kind of funny, right?
Well, I mean, at that time, it was supposed to be, that
pre-internet. We're talking.
Yeah, but it's like it could be a career killer, I think, and I think maybe there were some nude photos of Madonna that were leaked, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, her career's over now. She's going to be ruined." But her response was, "So what?"
What is the difference between being a drag queen in Atlanta and now California? Two different places, two major cities, but is it more accepting in California?
Well, I would say specifically San Francisco that's where I ended up, and still to this day, San Francisco is going to be very different from LA, because I think everybody in LA has stars in their eyes and plans to be the next big thing on TV or whatever. So there's a lot more higher production values or whatever.
Let me just ask you, obviously they're somewhat close, they're somewhat associated with each other, San Francisco and Los Angeles, but what is it that San Francisco has?
Well, it's used more of an antiquated term. I'd say it's like a hippie style. I think that's the
So it's like a bohemian, just a little bit different.
The first place I ever saw a bearded drag queen. I guess, and I'm sure that they have them in other places now. I noticed Willem is doing a bearded drag now. But
how'd you end up in San Francisco from Atlanta?
Well, I met a guy, a kind of a hippie guy, a neo hippie, the new version of hippies, back in the the early '90s. The rave scene was very big, and I guess that's the equivalent of what the hippies were doing in the '60s. But when you do a rave, you do drugs, psychedelics, or whatever, and then you just trance out to this kind of music, this house music or whatever, and it was fun. We would go out to places like Candlestick Park and have like all night raves, and it was more underground at that time. So actually, his name was he called himself Galactic Greg, and he was a Southern boy like myself. But we met in Atlanta while he was there, and then he said he'd lived in San Francisco, and I was kind of, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a romance or whatever, so I kind of followed him out to San Francisco, and of course it didn't work. It wasn't like a romance between us, which is fine. I mean, it brought me to San Francisco, and when I got to San Francisco, I just, fell in with that crowd, that world, and that's where I met Heclina, my friend that I met in '91, and who, we started hanging around at that point, and we were young and fun, loving seekers of enjoy. And to be honest, we were drinking and partying a lot at that time too. But it seemed like an age of innocence by comparison now. He went on to become very well known as Heclina, but when we first met, he was just calling himself Stefan, which was like his exotic version of his humdrum birth name, Stephen. His birth name was Stephen Grigelko. And so he decided to start doing drag. Believe it or not, I was usually the one who was more sober and together. He was a disaster when he would get wasted and drunk, but luckily he got sober. So, I mean, that was the best thing he could have done. He could have never gone as far as he did in life if he weren't sober. But, it's a long, winding road, and achieved a lot.
Just to paint a picture for our listeners, this is the 1990s in San Francisco, and Heclina became like the biggest drag queen on the scene. It was really Heclina and Juanita Moore, and to this day, I would say those two are probably the biggest drag queens, not just in San Francisco, but in the world.
Well, Peaches probably too.
There's Peaches Christ, but back then I would say Peaches was just kind of starting out, and Heclina was already doing a very famous club, which we can't say the word anymore because it's become politically incorrect. So we're just going to call it the Trans Shack, okay? But it was called...
The T-Shack.
Yeah, the T-Shack, we could even call it. I'm transgender, and I want to, respect my own community. So I'm not going to say what, it was called back then.
Well, that's the funny thing. We never thought it was disrespectful. I mean, it's a term we used to describe ourselves. I guess it's short for transvestite, or that was the thinking at the time. So it didn't really cross my mind that it was offensive.
How would you describe the T-Shack? What was it?
Well, it was a little bit like performance art and kind of messy, in many different variations. I think most people had an idea that drag queens were supposed to be going for a glamorous sort of, maybe like soap opera queen kind of look. But this kind of opened the doors to a lot of different interpretations. This is one of the first few places I remember ever seeing a drag king, that a female dressing as a male, or, then some of the drag queens would do more like horror kind of concept stuff. A person called Rhea Light used to do, and still does, a lot of this kind of performance art type stuff where the makeup is very bizarre, almost like an alien creature or some kind of a hybrid, like almost like a Picasso. So I mean, it's she's going for beyond being the traditional big false eyelashes.
An abstract human.
Yeah, kind of an abstract. That's a good way of putting an abstract human, or even maybe not a non-human or alien or a creature or something
abstract
like that.
Life form.
Yeah, and I think people pushed those boundaries, and they appreciated that because it was a lot more inclusive, and it allowed for more creative range. And that's why I think it's so. LA. If people do stuff like that, it's still very polished. It's a certain kind of. I mean, it seems like everybody in LA is poised for. They're waiting for their next callback or their audition. Or, if I'm going to present myself as the weird queen, I have to do it very, very well. I remember I've worked with some of these people that have been on Drag Race and stuff. I've done comedy shows with them and just talking backstage and stuff. I remember Vicky Vox, who's still making the rounds now, and we were just getting ready. I said, wow, you guys really are so polished. She says, well, you kind of have to be. And I said, because I remember she and Alaska and a lot of these other girls, Willem was there, they all had these kind of, it was more of a production. They had a stylist with them, and Alaska had somebody who was steaming her out. And she looked gorgeous, of course. But it's like, I think a lot of the San Francisco girls, they just show up and, throw on a wig. And I was that kind of style, probably a rodeo clown kind of drag, more of a.
I actually, to be honest, I saw some of the most incredible performance art to this day I've ever seen in my life at that venue. And, I saw a queen named Fatima who passed away, but Fatima was like the most punk rock of punk rock queens. And what she did is she came out and she had a staple gun and she just started staple gunning literally in real life her whole body as blood dripped down her. And by the way, she was like a plus size, okay? Like huge, like she looked like Divine, if you guys know who that is. Divine is an old drag queen from the 70s and 80s. She was like a large drag queen with like a shaved head and these huge giant plugs in her ear, and she looked like an alien. It was her makeup, it's just incredible, stunning performance that I saw. I remember from and that was just one out of every night you saw something like that there. It was insane. It was just an incredible time.
Well, yeah, and I think people who see that are inspired to do similar and push boundaries, be experimental, and it's cool. I think it can be a great cathartic experience for the people that are doing it to have a different interpretation of a song. And some people were really creative. There was this person called Kima who did, I think, 30 years of Madonna in 5 minutes, and that was.
I remember that. It was incredible. This is what this queen did. She did literally every look that Madonna had in 30 years in 5 minutes. So she changed her wig, her this, her that in 5 minutes, and every song, like she edited the songs. So it just looked like you were watching Madonna grow old in 5 minutes. It was insane. And not old, but I should say you watched the evolution of all her looks and everything.
She did another funny thing too called Possessa. Which is all like this. It was basically like The Exorcist, all these sound bites. She had this great little editing thing where she could do all these little sound bites from the Exorcist movie, but she was dressed up like a little doll, and then she would turn into this devil voice, and it was really clever, the editing, the way the sound editing was done.
As we've told the listeners, you guys are going to get to know me and Nigel as you listen to this podcast. And I just want to share with you guys how I actually met Pippi. I was living in the San Jose Bay Area, which was about an hour south of San Francisco. I was in high school. And I was in the same position kind of that Pippi was in North Carolina, where I was growing up gay and transgender and harassed, exactly. And, everybody wasn't very accepting. It was like the late 90s, so there was like a couple, people that were cool or whatever. But I basically had to get the heck out of there, and I went to the nearest big city, which was San Francisco. I was only 17. I had an ID that said I was older, and I had heard of this club where you could go and do drag and perform. And I already knew of Heclina, who was the hostess and the founder of the club. So to me, Heclina was like, she was like,
founder too.
So you guys found it together? I didn't know that. I mean, according to urban legend, it was all Heclina.
Well, she kind of deleted me from the history. Well, I mean, she was an alpha sort of person, but frankly, to be honest, I left early on. She says that I made the club a huge success by leaving, but the truth was that I needed to get sober. So I was just kind of becoming a blackout drinker and too much of a mess. I mean, and that was the club was associated with that. Like I blacked out at T-Shack well, we had these T-shirts that were printed up, and I think that was probably
So
based on me, but lots of other people. But I was I was partying and drinking too much, so I had to, something had to give.
well, Pippi,
But
you were known back then as the blackout queen. They called you because Pippi wasn't like finished partying until she blacked out. And
yeah,
I remember when I met you for the first time. Well, first I had come to the club just to see the performance, and when I walked in, I remember seeing you and Heclina on the stage, and I was like so starstruck by Heclina because we had heard about her all the way in San Jose. So I felt like I was meeting Madonna or something, or seeing her live, and I was so nervous and scared. And of course, being there, with a funny ID made me nervous too. But I remember you were hilarious, Pippi. I remember you doing like stand-up comedy or something on the stage, and then suddenly, this like 7 foot tall, maybe weighed about 12 pounds, beautiful transgender woman named Bridget Bratt comes out with a heavy metal guitar and starts playing this guitar and singing. It blew my mind. Like I'd never seen something like that. And then afterwards, Pippi, I remember drinking with you. I remember you invited me to Gay Pride. There was like Gay Pride going on, I think like in a couple months or something. I went there and you were the one that got me backstage, and you were so fun. You were so hilarious. And I was so grateful to have met you because you were the one that would always lift that velvet rope for me.
Well, now you've made your way in Hollywood, and you're a catfish celebrity, and just one thing after another.
Pippi, I don't know if you'd call being on Catfish a celebrity, but thank you for being so generous.
Looking for those opportunities.
Pippi, you said it perfectly, opportunities. I feel like I saw a video on Instagram, the Chupapi guy. What's that guy's name? Was that you on that video?
Is it at Walmart?
It's like a little guy. He does this Chupapi Muñeño. He's really funny, but you were at Walmart and he was messing with you and you were like, oh, I think that was
and
you.
I missed back.
Yeah.
That was me.
Okay, because I said Sham, I think that's Pippi. And then Sham's like, I think it is too. But that was awesome to see you on that because that guy gets tons of views.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the biggest things I did on the internet, actually. So I mean, I told Sham I just appeared in an adult porn film without playing the sex role. I was actually playing the father of my slutty daughter, who and we actually filmed it at the set of The Real World. Do you remember The Real World on MTV?
Of course.
So, of course, it's a fake house. It's a beautiful house, but it's a fake house. It's in Calabasas. It was a very interesting experience. So the storyline goes that my daughter is out slutting around, and she comes in, and I come down the stairs, and I say, "Is that you?" And I'm like the mad father, and I'm scolding her for all this. Her car has a tracking device on it, and I'm not paying for you to drive all over the town, to drive all over the L.A. getting laid. And then the knock on the door. It's the plumber. I've called the plumber because I've got a clogged drain, and so I bring him in, and he makes eye contact with my daughter, and of course that's going to lead to a sex scene later. But
well, Pippi,
that was my role.
I'm sure that we're going to be looking out for you on the Academy Awards for that role. But Pippi, getting back to just you and your life, okay? So you said that you had to get sober. What was going on in San Francisco at that time that inspired you to get sober, and how long have you been sober since then? What has that journey been like?
Well, it's a never-ending journey, really. I mean, I think it's just a matter of kind of facing the consequences of your actions and realizing where they can lead you, and the harm that you do to yourself. And I think that's a lesson Heclina learned too. But we're still, and she went to be a great success in life, and but day to day, life changes. You're presented with new challenges. You hear unbelievable stories in the news that make you feel like the apocalypse is upon us at any moment. I'm not really a diehard Bible thumper, 12-step kind of person, but I take it a day at a time. I'm living in the high desert now. I'm not in LA, so I actually rent a place from a Christian pastor who's an interesting person. But I wouldn't say that I'm very devout about anything. I always keep my mind open to different people's belief systems and stuff like that. And the thing about AA as a general concept, it feels very religious, and I think that turns a lot of people away from it who could benefit from it. But the thing that I remember most that I got from going to meetings was like, take what you need and leave the rest. So if you're getting something out of it that's keeping you sober, who cares if the other people there are as annoying as, the bottom line is like, oh, you've got to find a way to function and live in the world. So that's my challenge, and it continues to be. So, I mean, I get depressed. I've been diagnosed with depression. It's something that I guess has been with me since the beginning. I didn't really even know what it was. I just figured it was the circumstances that I found myself in, which was partly true. So obviously, that people can get depressed in the best of circumstances too. I've seen plenty of people that were seemed like they had the world at their feet. Everything seemed like it just landed in their laps, but they are still unhappy. So it's a quest for happiness and fulfillment.
So do you have a sponsor? Do you have somebody that you call when you're in those moments of weakness, if that's what you want to call it? Do you have somebody that helps you out, Pippi?
Yeah, I mean, everybody can be your potential sponsor. I think it's important to have anybody to talk to, even if it's somebody who doesn't think the way you do or whatever.
Just to be accountable, is that what it is?
Well, I think just to get things off your chest. I mean, some people, I think you hear about people that are when serial killers get caught or whatever, a lot of times people will say, oh, I never knew, he seemed like such a nice guy, he kept to himself.
Speaking of that,
people stew in their own juices,
Yeah.
Speaking of killers, Pippi, I know that there's a story that our listeners sit tight for this, because really, this is something else. Pippi lived in San Francisco. I'm going to let you tell it, Pippi, but all I know is what I read in the news. I know that one of Pippi's neighbors ended up getting murdered. And Pippi, I want you to tell all about that. Go ahead.
Well, I guess it was 2018, so years have elapsed since then, but this person was named Brian Egg, and he was kind of a typical San Francisco character. He was a gay hippie, and he was about 10 years, but more like 14 years older than me, so he was like the generation before mine, and they lived through the heyday of gay pride in the 70s, and then they also suffered the most during the early days of the AIDS crisis. So he was a definitely interesting, eccentric sort of person, and I would see him out on the street pretty much on a daily basis. And he also, I guess he had a kind of a weakness for these rough boys on the street, kind of homeless guys or whatever. And oftentimes he would open his home to let these guys come in and clash at his place for a while. And I don't know if there was sexual activity between them, although I suspect there must have been. I mean, that's probably part of the deal. But, regardless, that's just, it's his private life. But at some point, he just vanished. He disappeared. And this is someone I've been seeing for years and years. So I basically saw him every day, and then for him to just vanish. And a couple of the guys that had been hanging around were there at his house. And whenever anyone asked where Brian was, they had some excuse like, oh, he's gone on vacation or something like that. And anybody who knew him knew that he basically lived like a hermit. Most people who saw him probably thought he was homeless because of the way he dressed and didn't really, but he wasn't super wealthy, but he owned a home in San Francisco. The home was valued at over $1 million, which is, that's San Francisco property values for you. But anyway, he had disappeared and was gone for months and months. And so I was one of the first people who kind of raised the alarm and started asking other neighbors what they think, what was going on. It's kind of strange. There's these two mysterious guys living in this house, and he's nowhere to be seen. They say he's on a vacation, which I really don't believe. And But fast forward, the police finally came and did a welfare check, as they call it, to see if he was even there, and they got no answer because the guys were hiding out, and of course they see a cop. These are street guys. So, but it turned out he had been murdered in his home, and his dead body was there in the home, and they had cut off his head and his hands. Presumably to make it hard to identify him. I don't know, but I'm sure these guys are on drugs too. So people that are on meth do far out weird, crazy stuff. But anyway, they were squatting in his house, and they were also doing a lot of cleaning and scrubbing things down, and could smell the bleach from across the street. And then one day, a forensic van, a crime scene cleanup van. They even said it on the side. I don't think it said crime scene cleanup, but it said something like, basically, when people die at home, they have a special service that comes and removes the body. So these guys had hired a firm like that. And I don't know what they thought was going to happen. I guess they thought they would just remove his body and not ask any questions. But anyway, that's when everybody, myself and a couple of the other neighbors, saw this van pull up, and we all called 911. And next thing you know, it's a police matter. And then we've got these guys cordoning off the area, and people dressed in those hazmat suits. It looked like something from like a science fiction movie. But they didn't even find his body for a couple of days. They just had to pour over the whole house because I guess it was a little bit like a hoarder's house, and it was 2 stories, and it was kind of a disaster area. And plus, everybody's on meth.
So, did they catch the killer?
No, he's still at large. To be honest, it's a weird, ongoing, unsolved mystery. And I feel like it says a lot about how little the police care about an older gay man who wasn't wealthy or anything like that. But the person who called the forensic van was arrested, and then he was released later. His name was Robert McCaffrey. And then there's the other person is named Lance Silva, who was arrested on another charge. He had a charge like in Redwood City, and he just kind of seems like a career criminal. He had embezzled from his father's company, and so but they released him too. And so I guess all the cleanup and the bleach and stuff that they had done, there wasn't any real evidence to link anybody to anything. So these guys were both just let go. And then a follow-up, because there was some press about all this. And some guy named Derek Graves, who lives in New Orleans currently, he contacted me. Didn't know who he was or anything, but he says his boyfriend was one of those guys, and he was the one who murdered Brian. And I said, well, we should tell this to the police or whatever. So we did. We submitted his name and all that. But so that information has been given to the San Francisco homicide. But the boyfriend that was mentioned to me was he's like a drifter who passed through San Francisco, and his story was that Brian tried to rape him or molest him or whatever, and then he killed him as a result of that. But obviously I don't even know if the story is true or not, but it was just he reached out to me, and so I told him, I referred him to the San Francisco homicide, and it's been in their hands, and that's been about a year since that happened. But it was in August of 2018, so this coming August is going to be, the 4 years? 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. So, Pippi, let's pivot to a more happy subject. First of all, that was fascinating. I wasn't speaking at all because it was so riveting to hear that, and it sounds like a Netflix documentary. Netflix, if you're listening, you've got your next documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worthy of one of those shows because it still remains an unsolved mystery. Case.
So, Pippi, I want to talk about now the television appearances that you've been doing, because I've been privileged enough to be on television with you. Now, Pippi and I have had our ups and downs. The first time we were on TV together, actually, we were on Judge Steve Harvey. Heclina, who we were talking about before, was suing Pippi, and I came as a witness to Pippi's defense. Now, after that, Pippi decided that she was going to sue me in another television court over something that happened years ago on America's Court with Judge Ross. And Pippi, let bygones be bygones. I'm glad I won that case, even though, unfortunately, that show didn't pay us money the way Steve Harvey paid you and Heclina money, but not me for being a witness. And also, we did America Says, which is a game show. And that was all also because of Pippi, because Pippi's just like a mastermind at getting on television. In addition to that, I think the most interesting thing that we've done, which hasn't really been talked about, but I think a lot of people saw it, was Pippi and I were on a very well-known YouTube program called Soft White Underbelly. So we came on there because Pippi is more than a character. I've really never met anybody like Pippi. But Pippi basically, I don't know. One day, Pippi, you came to me after we went on our last TV appearance where we were basically fighting and I was mad at you. And you came at me and you said that you've got this fetish. You were like, I like to be an adult baby, which to me was like, what is that? Like, I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to be open-minded. I was like, I'm going to be open-minded with Pippi. And Pippi said to me that I am to not think of Pippi as Pippi. This is a whole different person. I'm just to know Pippi as baby when we hang out. And then you started coming over wearing like diapers and stuff. And then you told me that I could financially benefit from this if I would just hang out with you as a baby. So I did. And we went on Soft White Underbelly to talk about our, I guess, relationship doing that, which was not at all, for the listeners, anything intimate. Pippi just had this need to be a baby. And I tried to be open-minded, and I was a little bit selfish in the sense that I needed money. So I went along with it. And we talked about it on Soft White Underbelly, but it caused kind of a rift in our friendship, I feel, because Pippi, I just couldn't keep up. You told me that you had multiple personality. So I was trying to be open-minded to your mental health condition. And I was trying to I thought this was therapeutic for you, even though it was financially benefiting me. So I just want to know, what is going on with that? Do you have multiple personality disorder? Are you getting treated for it? What happened to baby?
Well, I guess I was self-diagnosed with all that. I mean, if you're an actor, you're playing different characters. So that's just something I was exploring. But the guy who produced that segment on YouTube actually wanted to have me back as Pippi and just talk about my life as Pippi too. So, I mean, what it comes down to is like the popularity of things. And frankly, at the time I thought, well, the adult baby thing seems popular.
Well, Pippi, you seem to be really into it. I mean, you were giving me money to do this. It didn't last long, but you did. And I was trying to, for me, it was very bizarre. And I thought it seemed like you were really into this. Like I said, it caused kind of a little friction. I think when money is introduced in friendships, things can get, just kind of weird. So, Pippi, I just want to say, honestly, I love you. I'm glad we're talking again. I'm glad we're friends again. And I really don't ever want to go on that road with you again. And if you need to be an adult baby, I think you should find another babysitter. But I wanted to explain this because people saw this, and I went back to Mark's studio, and Mark did by the way, Mark Laita, Laita, is the name of the brilliant photographer and visual artist that does these videos. And by the way, if you haven't seen Soft White Underbelly, he interviews like drug addicts, prostitutes, homeless, just the people that society has sort of, the underbelly of society. And the stories are really beautiful. He films it in a beautiful way. But I went back to kind of give the follow-up to all this, and he never put it out. So I'm glad, Pippi, that we had a chance to kind of talk about this on this podcast.
Well, it's always a matter of what is ultimately going to sell. I mean, unfortunately, that's what it comes down to. And I
Well,
think
that's
Mark
weird,
is
Pippi.
really
I
a
don't know about that. I mean,
he's a businessman
it
or
sounds like
whatever.
you're a businessman. I mean, for me, I was trying to go along with this and be open-minded. I mean, I didn't know you were doing this for the sake of his podcast. And why did you give me money for it then? That's very dedicated to your craft.
Well, you learn as you go, and sometimes you have to take risks that don't always work out in your favor. But every opportunity is a learning opportunity. But I'd be happy to go back on Mark's thing, but I don't think he would want to invite me again either. So
I think he was confused by everything, and I think he was kind of, I don't know, who knows what he was. I mean, I loved it. I loved talking to him. Honestly, the second time I did go back, he put it on his paywall, so you can see that one on there. And honestly, that was some of the most personal things I've ever said in any interview anywhere. You can find it on the softwhiteunderbelly.com website, but you have to go into the actual paywall. And I talked about things I have never told anybody, but something about that space that he has, if you've ever seen the studio, it's just like these 4 concrete walls and just him sitting behind a camera. Yes, it's in Skid Row in Los Angeles, in the most crazy part of downtown Los Angeles. So, it was really quite an experience. Yeah, Pippi. Anyway, besides that, what are you doing now?
Well, tomorrow I'm doing a music video for somebody named Corey. I don't even really know who it is. But, I mean, I guess I have to say I put the whore in actor because there's very few gigs that I will turn down. And, at my age, I'm often cast as the father, kind of I'm over 50 now. So, and I do a lot of costume work. There's this show, he didn't tell me not to talk about it, but it's called the Hip Hop Circus. And I'm interested to see how that works out. He's cast me as a clown. And so I'm sort of like an evil clown who maybe I talk to these guys that want to go far in hip hop, and it's like I'm playing the devil. You know how you sell your soul to the devil to get success, and so that's the way he described the character to me. And it's going to be on Tubi, which is not like Netflix or anything like that. But it's a streaming service. And so, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to explore that character and see what comes of it. But, I mean, I'm always willing to try something and see how it goes. I actually recorded a hip-hop song, too, which really seems funny. It was one of these streaming, another one of these streaming guys. There's a lot of young people that I'm working with, and it's interesting because, I mean, they find me interesting, and I am so, I feel like I'm so removed from their world. But the joke was that here I am, this middle-aged white guy trying to do a hip-hop gangster rap song, and they had written a few verses for me, and then I just made stuff up about sipping on lean and using my Glock and all. But I mean, it was for comic effect, but really well made recording, and it says a lot about how technology can crank out some. I mean, you don't even need actors and entertainers anymore because artificial intelligence
exactly
is so advanced now. It can do these things.
You can say artificial intelligence, do a Pippi doing a rap about lean, and it'll produce it for you.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And actually, some of my acting jobs have been in that same realm where I was turned into a CGI character, like they use in, video games, Grand Theft Auto, stuff like that. They're getting better and better with the characters looking like a real person. But what they do now is they capture people from head to toe. You go into this special kind of a chamber, and it's nothing but cameras, and you're surrounded by all these. It's almost like an alien abduction or something. So my body has been mass produced to be used in CGI, so there's no telling what will
your whole body's been video mapped.
Yeah. So and they can change, and
your likeness is now digital.
Yeah, so you might see me in something that I never even was on the set for. Actually, the thing that I did, it was for Netflix, and it's going to be a Robert De Niro film coming out where he plays the president, and myself and about 10 or 11 other actors were all doing these various scenes, reacting to him going by and stuff like that. So it was the same technology they used in Don't Look Up. In fact, it was the same studio where they did it. So that was a fascinating day for me to be there on that set, and they showed us some of their previous work, and I was really impressed. But so, I mean, there's very little that I would say no to when it comes to doing a production or something like that.
Can I just ask, because I don't think it's been brought up this whole hour, drag queens or bands or actors or stage names, it's such a big deal. It's your brand, Pippi. Where did that come from? Because I don't think we've ever addressed that.
Oh, well, as far as like my drag persona. Well, I mean, you have to go way back to the late 80s, 1988, and you probably don't even know who Dana. I can't remember her last name either, but she was the lead on Different Strokes. She was the sister, Kimberly. Dana Plato, that was her name. Dana Plato, Plato. And anyway, she had just recently been arrested. It became kind of a cliche that child stars become criminals and weirdos and outcasts later and after their career is over. And so I thought, well, I wonder whatever became of the little Pippi girl, because those movies were in the 70s. So it's actually the first actress who played her is my same age now. I think she's Swedish or something like that. But so we were born the same year, and I just thought, well, that'd be interesting to explore. With the Pippi post-childhood fame, trying to become a relevant adult actress, or not porno actress, but legitimate actress, and her struggles and stuff. So I decided that I would call myself Lovestocking because it's a little more, grown up instead of long stocking. So I did the pigtails and all that. That was the first TV show that I was doing back in those days at the public access TV, and it was called Transit Town Truck Stop, and I was the waitress that had just been paroled. And so we had different characters that would come through, and we also had some of the underground bands that would stop and play, because Atlanta is where I was, and it was a pretty big marketplace. That's where REM and the B-52s, other big bands that was their home base. So we would get these touring bands that would come by and perform at the truck stop, and it was a fun time. But anyway, so I was called Pippi Lovestocking then, and it just continued.
Pippi, can I talk about my favorite television appearance of yours of all time?
What's that?
Pippi was on the original Jerry Springer. Pippi and Heclina, the drag queen we were talking about earlier, God rest her soul, we love you, Heclina, up in heaven. Pippi and Heclina went on the original Jerry Springer because they were in a love triangle with a girl named Teresa. Tell us about that, Pippi. How did that even happen?
Well, they actually approached us. Those guys from Jerry Springer, they're always looking for something scandalous to get on the show, and they knew about Tranny Shack, as it was called at that time. This is like 1996. And they came to the show, and they were asking around, like, so what's going on? Is there anybody having any interesting scandals or whatever? And so I thought, well, I'm sure there is. We can make something up. And, spoiler alert, most things on TV are completely fabricated. But so we just sat around, and, I can divulge now that there really wasn't any truth behind all this, but we were all friends, and we wanted to be on TV, for Christ's sake. I mean, doesn't everybody want to be on TV?
How does somebody find your episode on Jerry Springer? Because that's legendary.
I think it might be labeled as My Jerry episode, and Heclina uploaded it. I know it's still on because I just looked it up.
So look up Heclina My Jerry episode. And by the way, I really want to dedicate this episode to Heclina. As we said earlier, Heclina unexpectedly passed away while on tour in London. I just want to say that, yeah, she was on tour with a show called Mommy Queerest with Peaches Christ, who's another incredible performer. I just want to say that Heclina's legacy can be seen from RuPaul, Drag Race, all the way to every dive bar across the nation where you see drag. She certainly was one of the most influential drag queens in my life because she's the first drag queen that ever put me on a stage before I was even old enough to be on that stage. And, you know, as I talked about earlier, I was up in that club with my fake ID, and I just want to say, for the record, that that was literally the most positive environment that I ever could have been in, being a 17-year-old kid running away from a bunch of bullying and homophobia, to have a place where not only was I accepted, but I was celebrated for being who I was. It was really amazing, and I want to thank you, Heclina up in heaven, for creating that space and for putting me on my first stage ever.
Wow. Well, you're just one of many who have that experience with Heclina. But she pretty much kept the door open for all potential weirdos, and she would exploit them.
Okay, I'm going to just cut in here as a heterosexual male for a moment. So I know all about, you know, RuPaul, the Drag Race, and RuPaul says, I'm not a drag queen, I'm the queen of drag. So how does that happen? Who delegates that? Because you seem to like be in it deep, and Heclina and RuPaul. Who started this whole thing? Or who was the first person to shine a light on it, rather?
Oh, well, gosh, I mean, I think it's just a bunch of coincidence of circumstances. Certainly we weren't, anybody there was not the first person to ever be in drag. I mean, drag has been going on since ancient times, the days of Jesus Christ, you know, so it's just a matter of it being properly exploited. And, you know, the people from World of Wonder, RuPaul's hit Supermodel, I think that was around 1992. And she was like a club kid. We were all like club kids that just went to bars and were go-go dancers and stuff like that. But it's not a new concept to be in drag at all.
That was certainly my first job.
As far as like media is concerned, who was the very first that you can recollect? Okay, this person is, you know, living a different lifestyle that you looked up to. Like, who is the Rolling Stones of the drag world for you?
Well, there was a person called Remy Haag. I think she died recently. Haag, Haag, German. And she did a couple of films and had kind of some disco hits. And she was the first transsexual that I really took much notice of. But, I mean, I think the first one, maybe 1950s, and I can't remember her name right now. I have to Google everybody now, but Christine, maybe, something like that. But, and of Renee Richards. There have been a lot of kind of figures but they weren't really drag queens, they were transgender. But Divine was the first drag queen that I really loved and thought was wonderful, and really would have liked to have been more like, because she was very outrageous and funny, and her looks were really punk rock and far out. She was just so irreverent, and all the lines that she did in her movies were so outrageous. So kick-ass, and, you know, she played criminals and stuff like that. So Babs Johnson, she was very quotable. She was the most famous. She was my first most, you know, drag queen idol, if you want to look for idol. I wouldn't say that I was ever a huge fan of RuPaul. I mean, because RuPaul was really just a very successfully so, but just, you know, more of a superficial kind of, you know, all about the supermodel and always being fierce. And I think there's more to it than just being fierce all the time. I think it's fun to have a fun, witty personality.
Yeah, for me, it's probably Holly Woodlawn from Andy Warhol days. If you've ever heard the song
Of course,
Walking on the
yeah.
Wild Side by Lou Reed. He talks about
Mhm.
Holly moved from Miami, FLA.
Miami,
Yeah,
yeah.
so she was from Miami, Florida, and she actually
She hitchhiked her way across the USA.
yes, there you go.
She's
Yes.
on the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
see?
Yes. I implore everybody to read her book. She wrote a book called A Low Life in High Heels, and that book
Yeah.
inspired my entire life. I read it when I was 16, and when I came to LA and was go-go dancing there, Holly Woodlawn was one of the first people I met. She was in the dressing room of Club Cherry. Her and Alexis Arquette actually were the first two, I would say, celebrities that I met, and not only celebrities, but people that I really looked up to. And of course, Candy Darling, who died long before I was even born. Candy was
Yeah.
Another Andy Warhol, also
Well, yeah, I mean,
transgender.
all of the, and so was Holly. So all of the Andy Warhol celebrities were sort of celebrities by default because he was, it was a parody of a celebrity or something like that. So too far out for the average person to really grip the concept. But all of Andy Warhol's work was meant to be ironic, doing a picture of a soup can and stuff like that, and just elevating it. Things can be elevated if anybody says that like you could do a lithograph picture of a pile of dog poop and say that this is art, and then if no one argues the point, and that.
It's like a bit of groupthink. It's just, this is what it is, and oh, it's so great. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting about the times we're living in now. I mean, they're so divisive, and I think the internet and the web, the spreading of misinformation has never been easier than it is today.
And as AI comes into the factor,
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the future could hold. As it is, you can already do these deep fakes.
and you're digitized, so you have nowhere to go.
Yeah,
You're in the Matrix.
Other people are too. So I mean, like people can do Putin and make it or President Biden, whomever, and they can do a deep fake, and it looks like it's really them.
Yeah, these deep fakes are, again, for the listeners, deep fake is basically taking audio and video of a real person living or past and basically manipulating them to say things that are not real, but it can cause confusion. It
like
can
they could declare war or something.
Yeah. So that's the thing where it's like at a certain point, it's going to get very hard to decipher what is real.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming, and I mean, it seemed like the work of science fiction that it would never be possible, but we're living we're here now. We're watching this happen. So it's and then when someone does speak the truth, people don't believe it, because there's just so much conflict around it. So it's a brave new world. It's hard to know what to believe.
Technology giveth and taketh.
Yeah, we're going to have to reach a different, kind of a better understanding, or a trust threshold or something like that. But
we love you, Pippi. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you for talking to us, Pippi.
How can they find you? Social media, The Matrix, we've discussed that. How can they download you?
Yeah, well, I do. I've been dragged into the Instagram world, so now I know that I have to have an Instagram, and the Pippi Lovestocking, and that's where I kind of post updates about what I'm up to.
Find Pippi Lovestocking on the Pippi Lovestocking on Instagram, and don't forget to check out episode 5 of season 1, Judge Steve Harvey. The episode is called "Don't Drag Me Into This." You're gonna see me, Pippi, and Heclina fighting it out in court. Check out that episode.
Yeah,
I came to Pippi's
classic
defense, and I was fighting with Heclina.
Frankly, you stole the show.
I just want to apologize to Heclina. Honestly, I did have to do my job and testify against you, Heclina.
Well, you gotta give them a show.
It wasn't a show. It was the truth. She is the godfather of the drag scene, and I told it how it is. Don't be mad at me, Heclina. I still love and respect you. Now, thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to Living Legendary Podcast with Lady Sham and Baby Nigel and our incredible guest, Pippi Lovestocking, also known as Scott Free.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'll see you soon.